Welcome to Positive Recovery MD. If you're listening, chances are you want to create happiness around you and thrive in your life. We're glad you're here and you've come to the right place. This podcast will inspire and motivate you to not merely survive your recovery journey, we'll give you the tools to build or strengthen your foundation to thrive and flourish in your life. Each week, we'll come together as a community to have authentic conversations around addiction, recovery, and what matters. Growth and progress, not perfection. All while developing positive habits for you to utilize in your life. To learn more, please visit positiverecoverymd.com to sign up to receive the daily positive interventions that we'll review, as well as gain access to exclusive Positive Recovery content available only to Positive Recovery MD listeners. All right, let's get started.
Hello again, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another installment of Positive Recovery MD podcast, where we aim to help you thrive, not just in recovery, at work, in life, wherever, with your co-host, Dr. Jason Powers and Julie DeNofa, who's going to introduce our very interesting guest, Navid Khodaparast.
Yes. All right. Well, I am super excited to have Navid here with us. I'm going to try hard not to butcher his last name. What I will say is that Navid is going to share information with our listeners today about opiate use disorder and some really groundbreaking techniques in order to help those who suffer from opiate use disorder. So Dr. Navid Khodaparast, he does have his Ph.D. in neurophysiology that focused on using vagus nerve stimulation to promote innate restorative brain plasticity and to treat neurological disease. A lot of his research is considered foundational for the principle of target neuroplasticity training and has led to multiple clinical trials for stroke rehabilitation. Navid has over 10 years experience in translating neuromodulatory therapies to treat neurological and psychiatric disorders. He is a scientifically driven entrepreneur and has led clinical research at multiple early stage medical device companies involved in Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, and cardiac disease. Most recently, he has been focusing on the space of addiction medicine. He is the chief science officer and founder at Spark Biomedical, who is an amazing partner for us at Positive Recovery Centers. And over the last 5 years, he has been a principal investigator for multiple successful NIH-funded studies, publications that have received over 800 citations, and is an inventor of the transcutaneous auricular neurostimulation device that he's going to share a lot about with us today. And I know that a lot of these words are big and for our listeners, maybe like, okay, what the heck are they talking about? But Navid is going to do an amazing job of sharing some hope for folks who suffer for opiate use disorder. More recently, like I said, he's the chief science officer and he is responsible for overseeing Spark's clinical initiatives and works to advance the technology into new potential indications. One cool thing about Navid is that he loves to cook and grill and play racquetball. So although he has like this super impressive doctor title, he loves to do normal things and he loves dogs and just, being part of. So thank you for being part of our podcast today. And I can't wait to hear more about what you can share with our listeners.
Well, thank you so much, Julie and Jason. It's such a pleasure to be part of y'all's podcast. And as you stated, I've been privileged to be part of the Positive Recovery Centers community. And so I want to say thank you for that and helping us spread our technology to help more and more patients and their families across the United States. So it's just such a pleasure to be able to talk with you today.
Awesome. And so before we open up, I'm going to break down a couple of the words, the big fancy words that Julie spoke about. And I know, Navid, you do a great job of speaking to lay people, but the vagus nerve was one of the ones. And it's like what stays in the vagus nerve or what happens in the vagus nerve stays in the vagus nerve. No, so
I used to have a shirt in college that said that. So it's fun.
That's awesome. So it's not like named after a city. It's the 10th cranial nerve. Yes.
Right.
And it's part of the parasympathetic nervous system. Now people know what the sympathetic nervous system is, even if they don't know the word. It's sort of like when you go into fight or flight. And it speeds things up and it constricts things and you need it for survival, but it's sort of not the brakes, not what's calm, not what's restorative. So when you meditate, when you're asleep and you're healing, and actually there are some sound frequencies, one of which I love is the purring sound of a cat that is actually healing and restorative. And And I'm sure it has something to do with the vagus nerve, but I don't know. You probably know. But the point is, when you're engaged in things that help restore and calm, peace, think of that. It's the parasympathetic nervous system. And tell us about how you sort of discovered that what was being done for that in a different field, you could actually, what you invented did the same thing, but through the outside of the body via the ear. So yeah, tell us that story. I love it.
Right. So yeah, the vagus is not the city. It's definitely the 10th cranial nerve, like you stated. So you have 12 cranial nerves in your body. And the vagus nerve has just always been known as the nerve that controls your heart, right? It's just really been like, as you stated, it can increase your heart rate or it can decrease your heart rate. But what we've learned over time in the last 10 to 15 years is the vagus nerve has had a tremendous amount of influence, not only in our body's functioning, but also in curing and preventing disease. And so my earlier research was on taking a medical device that you would implant into your neck and stimulate the vagus nerve directly. And so you have two of them right next to your carotid arteries. They go right next to it. And the vagus sends signals to your brain, and then it sends signals down to your body, right, to your gut. And we would actually put a cuff electrode on the vagus and stimulate it. And at that time, I was using it to drive neuroplasticity. And that sounds like a big word, but it's really just brain change, right? How to change your brain. And when you're thinking about it from a curative standpoint, as a treatment, changing the brain can be really beneficial for someone that suffered from a stroke, right? They lose the ability to use their hand, they can't talk. And if you can use this nerve to promote plasticity and change your brain in a way that can restore function, then that can be greatly beneficial to a patient that suffered from a stroke. What we've learned is the vagus nerve, even though it's deep in your neck, it has a projection that goes straight to your ear. And as great scientists, we give it funny names, such as the auricular branch of the vagus nerve, right? And it's essentially just a branch. It comes right off of the vagus nerve and it goes straight to your ear. And why this is important is for a lot of reasons. The biggest reason is it's extremely non-invasive. To be able to stimulate a nerve through your skin as opposed to having an implant, having surgery, is a huge advantage to patients and their families. Obviously, the cost of it too, right? These are very expensive devices that they implant in you, whereas something that can be on the external, outside your body, can be much less expensive and more appreciable, and you can get it to more patients across many different types of diseases. So to your point, Jason, when you stimulate the ear specifically and right above your ear canal, you're stimulating the auricular branch of the vagus nerve, and that gives a pathway into your brain that allows you to activate different important structures in your brain that can help with addiction and withdrawal.
Right. I think we can all benefit from brain change, not only those who have had a stroke, but let's just put the, addiction piece aside. We all have certain brain, functions, some of which have outlived their usefulness. They were very useful when we were survival was precarious, right? Something called negativity bias or hedonic adaptation and this type of thing. And the brain is amazing. Your daughter is 3. There's this original artwork by her behind you, which is amazing. And, those aren't copies. Those are originals. The thing is if you ever watch an infant try to eat food, they suck at it, right? Food gets all over their face, on the floor. But by the time they're our age, or humans are our age, we're so good at eating, we could eat in the dark. We could eat while talking. And that's neuroplasticity at work. The brain, you are what you repeatedly do. So let's just say, you have bad habits. Addiction is more than a bad habit, but it's certainly a bad habit. So anything that you do repeatedly over time is going to create brain pathways, and boom. So you're sort of almost like a stroke victim in that. Not that a whole part of the brain is dead, can't work. It's just that you have these superhighways of dysfunctional but easy systems that kind of take over and are when you're on automatic pilot. So when you don't have to actually do a surgery, there's nothing implanted. Invasive means cutting somebody open or sort of piercing their body and putting something in or removing something or doing something. So this is really just putting something on the ear, which at first glance might be, well, how does that work? I know there's acupuncture, but like you said, Tell us how stimulating that branch can actually change those brain pathways that are created either by, like lack of blood flow, stroke, whatever, or by habit.
Right. And so, the way I looked at it was what has been done before us, right? And so the easiest way to think of it is there's a lot of great solutions out there that can help with patients specifically that are dealing with opioid use disorder, and more specifically dealing with opioid withdrawal. And those solutions are medications, right? There's a lot of great medications out there, such as buprenorphine, Suboxone, methadone, some of the antagonist, anti-opioid medications out there, such as Vivitrol. Now there's non-opioid based medications, such as Lucemira, right? Just recently approved by the FDA. And when you look at these medications, they all kind of focus on one area of the brain. And even more, it's these little opioid receptors that we have. And so if you're about to experience withdrawal or you are experiencing withdrawal, these medications' jobs are to go in, bind to those opioid receptors, and replace. So if you're taking heroin, let's say, and you stop taking heroin, well, then you're going to go into withdrawal unless you take these medications and they can stop that withdrawal or reduce the amount and provide you relief. So when I looked at that, I thought about how can we use neurostimulation to create a very similar effect to that, right? Not replace these medications because they do a fantastic job, but really to do a similar effect or to provide additional relief to the patient. And so what we found when using our device, and if you look at the scientific literature that goes back literally 50 years, and so I always want to be the original. All scientists want to be the original. You want to say, I got it. I'm Nobel Prize worthy, right? It's very rare. It rarely happens. And when I went and actually started looking at the literature, I found that this went all the way back into the 1940s. There was a device called the electrosleep device that came out of Russia. And what they were using that device for, and it had two electrodes that went above your eyes, and then two electrodes that went behind your ears. So it was essentially stimulating your forehead and it was going across your ears.
So your facial nerve here, and maybe like the accessory, I don't know what's going on.
Occipital nerve back here, facial, and you're getting some trigeminal nerve, right? Which is great. Well, it's actually one of the nerves we like, the trigeminal nerve. Spark focuses on the trigeminal nerve. But that device, if you tracked it over time, and you look, it came to the US and they actually did a couple of randomized control trials looking at how it helped with patients undergoing heroin detoxification and provided really good relief. And then you boil down even further and you say, well, how does this work? The idea is pretty simple. When you deliver neurostimulation, when you deliver electricity through the skin, specifically through the ear, it activates certain areas in your brain that are responsible for releasing endorphins, right? We all know endorphins. You eat food, you get endorphins. You go exercise, you get, you hear about the runner's high. When you're running, you get that endorphin release.
If you exercise while you eat cupcakes, you get more endorphin release?
100%. I do it every day. But, the idea is just the same. Endorphins are, so this is a scientific term, exogenous opioids or opioids you take from outside your body. And then there's endogenous opioids, which are opioids from within your body that are natural to you, and those are endorphins. And endorphins do no different than an opioid. They go and they bind to an opioid receptor and they give you pleasure and they make you feel better, or they have pain relief. Exact same thing as an endorphin. Endorphin binds to an opioid receptor and that releases a neurochemical called dopamine, which is pleasurable. And that leads to either a good response, motivation, or in the case of opioid withdrawal, you have less opioid withdrawal symptoms.
Right. And just so you guys listening know, like these natural painkillers are like almost mimic exactly exogenous painkillers like a hydrocodone, oxycodone, or heroin. So much so that if you gave somebody a blocker of these opiate medications, say naloxone or naltrexone, it blocks the effect of natural endorphins so that you don't get like the same pain relief that you would from things that you normally would. Say, it's amazing. They block the effects of placebos. like naloxone will block the effect of placebo, because placebo basically, you think it's working, your body releases these natural endorphins and boom. So it's amazing to see the effects of it on opiate withdrawal, because it does have the same effect there. I guess I don't know if you can talk about this. Maybe it's a little theoretical, but your experience in neuroplasticity for stroke patients, like the brain dysfunction there is really severe. And a lot of our listeners, a lot of our, people that we help have brain dysfunction that maybe doesn't rise to the level of stroke, but they do get better with your device over time. And so can you just speak of like what I'm interested in, the healing properties of the vagus nerve and sort of things that maybe you can teach us we wouldn't be able to read in the lay media, say.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because, I think addiction is just as deadly as stroke. I don't view them as different. It is definitely a disease. It is a neuroplastic disease that occurs over time. And so, if you think about reward, right, there's a lot of different things your brain is really good at doing, which is keeping you alive. And so that's like breathing and your heart rate and digestion, you get nutrients, all of that stuff. But what people really don't think about as like survival is reward, right?
Right.
So the classic example of reward is, well, what do you need to do to survive? And I'm going to reward you for it. So two big ones are sex and food, right? You have to have sex to procreate so you can continue your species. And you have to have food so that you can keep yourself alive, so that you can have sex and procreate and keep your species alive, right? It's all kind of funny how these things are all encyclical. But nonetheless, as you take an opioid, this completely disrupts the system, right? I heard this term the other day. It's become more and more popular, is hijack, right? You've probably heard this. It hijacks your brain and it changes how your brain is working. It causes dysfunction in your brain. And why that's important is because it goes back to what you're saying. It's a neuroplastic issue. It's a change that happens. And this is hard wiring. This is not something that just goes one way and then goes back the next day. It can be permanently changed that way. And so when we look at how vagus nerve stimulation can help with this, is because you're taking something that's from outside your body and you're telling your brain you should use this. But when you remove that, well, now your brain is going to be dependent on some other signal to replace it. And so we use vagus nerve stimulation, we use trigeminal nerve stimulation to provide that endorphin, which is now replacing heroin or Oxycontin or whatever it may be, to give your brain the ability to say, okay, I'm going to use this instead of using that.
And you know why that's so important? Because our patients, like early on, especially, like they don't have the same sense of reward and motivation. And the brain knows, hey, if you go and use, or that there's a cheap shortcut to that dopamine spike, which at this point, the brain still thinks is survival. So like, the natural, healthy, rewarding activities are hijacked, supplanted by rewards that the brain at some level thinks is survival, which is really like, if you don't have addiction, it sounds really insane, right? How can using heroin be like breathing? But it's more of a reward in the part of the brain that controls survival. It's not the frontal lobe. The frontal lobe is not online yet. So I think in that early part, and it takes up to 2 years, quite frankly, for you to sort of get not your brain back completely, but most of the healing happens in the first year. So I don't mean to say like for 2 years you're going to be a zombie. It's just that I count on my patients having an adequate sense of reward, so they do the things that actually make the life rewarding enough, so the relapse is less likely. So something like this can help not just an opiate withdrawal, but especially for that post-acute withdrawal for that 1 year, even up to 2 years. And let me ask you, so if I'm going out on a limb, I know you don't have the indication for that, for 2 years for any addiction, but what would be the side effects if somebody were to use your device? And it's something that is on the outside of the ear. First of all, is it painful? Are there any problems with people that have high blood pressure or taking medicines?
Right. So in terms of the device, we don't have any contraindications for the device, meaning, you can be on any medication. We do have warnings, in terms of the device through the FDA. So it is an FDA cleared device. It's recently FDA cleared this year.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's the indication for use is to help with providing opioid withdrawal relief. And so we are targeting patients that obviously are experiencing opioid withdrawal. and obviously patients that are experiencing protracted withdrawal, to your point. What I want to state is our long-term use of using this system is what we're testing next. So we just got a large NIH-funded grant to look at the long-term addiction and looking at how the device can help with long-term addiction, specifically for relapse prevention. So we're very proud of that. And, we partnered with Hazelden Betty Ford and Gadenzia to be able to do this clinical trial. It's multi-site, it's across the US. So it's something that we're very proud about. Because
congratulations, by the way, because that is a huge grant that you received. That's no small thing. That's a huge thing.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we're super proud of it, and to be, we're humbled by our partners as well through the process. But to your point, Jason, that's exactly what that study will show, is not only how does it help patients during acute opioid withdrawal, but then how does it help with protracted withdrawal? And then we look at some of the other factors that most people don't really consider addiction. How does it affect your depression, your PTSD, your anxiety, your quality of life? All of these things factor into relapse, aside from this, I crave a drug, right? And so that study will give us a very clear idea how neurostimulation helps with that, in conjunction, in addition to other medications that will be in the trial, such as Lucemira and Vivitrol.
For us here at Positive Recovery Centers, and for our listeners, it's really easy for our patients to say, yes, I want to try that. And so we've had many people that we have used the device on. And so it's a really simple device. It's like a little, almost like a piece of tape that goes around your ear. It picks, peels back, you stick it on. Then you have like two little pieces that go into your ear, and there's a controller, and the controller is set to stimulate the nerves that we've been talking about. And we can set it based upon when the patient first starts to feel the response. And then the client actually, or the patient actually takes this device around with them. They can wear it on their waist on a little holster, and they can adjust the stimulation, right? And so for many, that gives them a sense of control, that they have some responsibility to how they can get their relief. And, in the clients and patients that we've used it at Positive Recovery Centers, we've seen almost an immediate response to it, where there's a decrease in the COW scores. There's a decrease in a kind of the level of anxiety, irritability, just symptomatic, like people that were extremely restless, like kind of writhing around and not feeling comfortable, really be able to settle down. We had a person in the lobby that was using it that within a very short period of time, like I'm talking less than an hour, they were sound asleep while we were finishing up getting things ready for them for admission. And so
it's not sedating though, right?
No, it's not, but it's
okay.
Sorry. And I apologize to our listeners, but there's nothing. Like Navid said, there's nothing that's really contraindicates you from using it really in any situation.
Pacemaker, right? If you have a pacemaker.
So if you have other neurological devices, a pacemaker is included in that.
Or even a pen, like an implantable.
Right. And it's mainly from the side of the devices could interfere with each other, right? And so if there's a patient, let's say, has a spinal cord stimulator for pain, if they can turn the device off for a period of time, then they can use the auricular device. But it really is in the hands of you, Dr. Powers, to be able to determine whether a patient would qualify or not.
Okay.
We do provide the warnings to help you understand what would be a good patient or not.
Got it. And sorry, Julie, I was just in my head, I thought pacemaker was a contraindication. So let me ask you, and I'm saying this out loud so that I'm accountable, and on a follow-up podcast, I really want to report to this. And I'll definitely pay out of pocket for it. Like, I'm almost 2 decades sober. But my whole life I've had, in Yiddish, called spelkies, or ants in the pants. The diagnosis has been ADD. And my brain goes so fast, and sometimes it's useful. A lot of times it's just annoying when I cut people off, and I don't like it. I'd rather be a lot like my friend Daniel Levine, or even his brother, who I had dinner with the other night with a future interviewee for the podcast named Dow. And they were just so chill. And then they think before they talk. And I would love that. And I just wonder, do you think it would have the effect on someone like me who's sober? And, I'm not on any medicine. I take an antidepressant, but.
I couldn't agree more. That's one of the things we looked at in our clinical trials was PTSD. But when you look at ADHD, there is a device out there that is a trigeminal nerve stimulator that it's over the forehead, right? And it's FDA cleared for adolescent ADHD. And it has shown to have very good effects in reducing ADHD symptoms and reducing the need for stimulants.
You have to walk around with electrodes on your forehead?
A lot of times, since it's for adolescents, they do it at night when they're sleeping. So you don't have to go out and scarlet letter yourself with a device on the forehead.
Oh, no, I have ADD. Yeah, don't worry about these.
Yeah. Don't worry about
with
that.
Spark Biomedical, the device that we're talking about for opiate use disorder, and I don't want to confuse the two, Dr. Powers, but for the opiate use disorder, it's called the Sparrow. And for our listeners, I want to just share, like, I am not in recovery. I don't have an addiction issue. And I put the device on because I don't like to ask other people to do things unless I've experienced if it's something safe for me to do. And I did put the device on. I had it on for a very short period of time. And so that Zen-like quality that you're talking about, Dr. Powers, was like, I was just like, post-massage almost. Like, I don't know if anybody ever or listeners experience post-massage brain, but like I could barely like put two words together. I was so chill, so relaxed. For folks who suffer from opiate use disorder, their level of irritability and fear and concern about going through withdrawal and what that's going to look like for them is such a huge component. And so I've seen that, take people down several notches very quickly. And then also, I don't want to take away from the fact that they are going through real withdrawal, like they have, abdominal cramping. They may have other, unpleasant side effects from opiate use withdrawal. We use something that we score people with to determine, what level of withdrawal they're in. It's called the COW score. Right. And so the COW score, in your studies, and you can speak specifically to your studies, Navid, but for us, we were dropping people's COW scores by like 8 points.
Which is a lot. That's a lot.
Yeah, within a very short period of time. And, we have had our patients come and say, like, it's a time for me to put my device back on, like after they showered or something like that. So there is definitely a benefit for folks to be using this device. And I see a benefit, not just with opiate use disorder, which is FDA approved, but with, folks who are just experiencing post-acute withdrawal or irritability that don't even have an opiate use disorder, but have some other disorder. So I just wanted to share that for our listeners because it definitely has that impact for sure. And perhaps Navid and Dr. Powers can talk a little bit more about like the overall, COWs and the scoring and your studies and what that looks like, because I think that's important too.
Yeah, sure. So, in our clinical trial, your 8-point drop is pretty much exactly what we said, actually a little bit better. I think we had a 7-point drop in our patients. And so we did a clinical trial. That was the study that we did to get our FDA clearance. It was done in Austin, Texas. So a local Texas study. But nonetheless, it was all on patients that had opioid disorder. They all came in, coming off. Most of them were primarily on heroin. All of them were polysubstance use disorder to some degree, but they had to have opioid use disorder. And what we saw within the first 1 hour was about a 7 to 8 point reduction in that first 1 hour of using the device. And I do want to point, during that first hour, no medications were allowed in the trial. So we didn't have any comfort medications during that first hour. So you're getting that effect purely from the Sparrow device. And so that 7 to 8 point, just so you get an idea, that's about a 50% reduction in your withdrawal symptoms.
Significant.
Which is pretty significant. If you look at some of the other pharma trials, buprenorphine does have a very good effect, but it doesn't take that effect that quickly. Usually you get about 30% reduction around there with buprenorphine or more, but 50% reduction in the first hour is pretty strong and pretty rapid.
And what symptoms would you say have been impacted the most?
So for the most part, we see improvements. So if you look at the COW scale, there's an 11 criteria scale to that. And then most of the times we see kind of all related to parasympathetic activity. So improvement in GI. So, gastric, if you're having upset stomach, nausea, it improves that. It improves tremor, it improves anxiety. It improves some of the bone and joint aches that you have associated with withdrawal, that flu-like symptom. And so those are pretty much the top 5 symptoms that we were able to get pretty good control over.
How did you come up with the name Sparrow? What is it about the bird that sort of piqued your interest, and what's the application?
We have an amazing marketing team at Spark, and you guys have probably met her, Jackie Powell. She's really great, and and her husband Daniel Powell. If you guys didn't know that, they're husband and wife. So Daniel Powell is our CEO, and they just have a great marketing background, and both of them combined, and we just kind of understand the process, and it is a process. It's pretty amazing that they send out different names to the whole company, and then we all vote on it, and then we land on names. And we really like the name Sparrow. It's a small bird, but it's a formidable bird. If you read about the sparrow, it goes in and it can take charge, and even though it has a small presence, it's a very strong bird. And so we really like the name Sparrow, and our next products will have very similar bird names that have a good meaning. So,
all right. Yeah. No, I knew there was something. So yeah, it's a formidable bird, even though it's small, carries a big punch. That's great. So I think we will go into the next phase where I'm going to throw some questions at you, answer anything that comes to your head. So the first one is, what is your favorite sound?
Oh man, that's tough. I like cars. So, I'm going to go with that. I love the sound of the
Maserati.
I was like, yeah, exactly. I love Italian sports cars, German sports cars. So I love that revving sound, it gets me going. So yeah, I'll say kind of the revving of a motor.
Awesome. What's your least favorite sound?
Chalkboard, nails on a chalkboard.
And your favorite word?
Happy.
Least favorite word?
Unhappy.
All right. So in an alternate universe, think of the multiverse, what vocation do you think you'd love to have a stab at?
Oh my goodness. I don't know, maybe being an astronaut or something like that. Just kind of space exploration. It's always intrigued me.
All right, cool. And what vocation would you loathe doing?
I don't know. That's a tough one as well. I would say something where I just don't get to do anything that doesn't help people. Everything I like to do just helps people. So as long as
so in other words, being a lawyer.
I can't say that. I have some lawyers in my family, but I will kind of wink at you in agreement.
No, me too. They're an easy bunt of jokes, as am I. Okay. Assuming there's a God, when you die and you're at the pearly gates, what would you like to hear come out of God's mouth?
You did good. You helped humanity.
And right.
Yeah, there you go.
here's your Maserati. All right.
That's awesome. We're going to move into the next section. And for our listeners, this is out of the Positive Recovery Daily Guide, which is a book that we use here at Positive Recovery Centers. That's a daily positive intervention. And we sent it in advance to Navid. And it starts with a quote: "Patterns persist. Persistent patterns persist persistently." And that's by Alan Fox. So who are you? While you might look at your intentions, feelings, thoughts, or words to answer that question, these areas are deceiving. Instead, look at your behaviors. Actions reveal your true identity. People are what they repeatedly do. The best predictor of future behavior is current behavior, and most people intuitively prospect accordingly. People will generally know who you are and what you want through observing what you do and the company you keep. Your intentions, therefore, are inconsequential. Your words generally reveal only your integrity, because most people have pretty good lie detectors. So the positive intervention associated with this is to recognize your own patterns or habits and expect them to persist. Make a top 10 list of your habits. Continue doing those healthy, positive habits, but change the habits that aren't healthy or positive. Good habits are easily broken, so reinforce those as often as possible. Bad habits, however, are hard to break and easy to start. Therefore, do one of two things. One, avoid bad habits and any temptation to continue engaging in them. Or two, intentionally try to change them. We asked Navid, and we can ask you too, to journal about what you plan to change, how you plan to do it, and how you plan to refer to it throughout the next 30 days. So we won't necessarily know what the next 30 days looks like for Navid, but when you were participating in this positive intervention, what kind of came up for you? How did you participate in it? And would you share with our listeners?
I think it's all kind of related to some of those clinical trials that we're really pushing hard on. My goal as a scientist is to promote the best science and to be able to help as many people possible. Right now, my eyes are focused on addiction. I've worked in a lot of different indications, but addiction is where I want to be. This is an area I'm super passionate about. And I guarantee you in the next 30 days, I'm going to be pushing as hard as I can to help people that are suffering from addiction.
Fantastic. I know that your work kind of brought you through this because this can help with addiction, the Sparrow device. But you said you're super passionate about it. Can you share a little bit about your passion?
Super passionate about the Sparrow device?
And about working in the space of addiction. Like, what is it that draws you? What kind of causes that passion?
Yeah, I think in this space is just fascinating to me. Again, it goes back to the brain and plasticity and all of that. But I have friends, I've had family that have suffered from addiction. That's it's not unusual. We live in an opioid epidemic. If you don't know someone, then I don't know where you've been. So obviously all of that, but it's just an area that I think it's so understood, or so it's not understood enough for us to be able to make the right decisions. The stigmatism is too high. There's too many people that really just think you can willfully get out of this. And I think when you start looking at that, at least from a scientist, you say, well, what's the real answer behind all of this? And how can we make it better for these patients and their families? And so that's my passion. I really think we have a new tool in the toolbox, right? We're not trying to reinvent the wheel, but being able to take a tool such as neurostimulation and apply it to all the great medications that are out there that may provide another smile, save a life potentially. That's passion enough for me. So that's really something big. And then one last thing, we are having we do help babies as well. So my passion is to help babies that are suffering from neonatal opioid withdrawal syndrome. And so we've been able to have very good success using the same device in babies suffering from NOWs. So we have a lot to be passionate about, and it's an exciting time.
So I don't want to gloss over that, because as part of the opioid epidemic, there are a lot of babies that are being born and are in the NICU. There's treatment programs out there that are specifically set up to help pregnant women who are addicted, and then the babies after they're born. Tell us a little bit about that study.
Right. So we ran a very early phase 1 trial, which essentially looked at how to use our device, which at the time was called the RU device. It had a cute name because it might
Kangaroo, right? Like from Winnie the Pooh. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And so we used, it's essentially the same device as the Sparrow. We just shrunk the earpiece down to fit a baby's ear. And as babies that are born with NOWs or NAS, neonatal opioid withdrawal syndrome, which is defined as NOWs, a lot of times they're required to go under oral morphine. They need oral morphine to help with their withdrawal symptoms. And so the goal of our study that we ran was to show that we could reduce the amount of oral morphine required and also reduce the amount of time in the NICU. And what we were able to see is, so if you look at the national average of NOWs, the time on oral morphine is roughly 23 days. In our clinical trial, it was 9 days.
Wow.
That they required oral morphine. And it was a really impressive result. And we also received another NIH grant for that as well, just not too long ago, where we're going to do a much larger trial, which it'll be a randomized control trial. You've probably heard a lot of randomized control trials in COVID times, right? The data is not good unless it's a randomized control trial. So we're doing that, and to be able to see if we could get this product for babies to market. So another FDA clearance or approval for that product.
Wow, that's amazing work that you're doing. I know that our listeners are fully aware that when that happens, it's heartbreaking to see those babies in the NICU so tiny and just screaming and crying, and just it's heartbreaking. But to reduce it like that, that's without medication too. That's, wow.
It is. And, they're the youngest humans on the earth that are suffering from the opioid crisis, right? And it is debilitating to watch them and suffer through that. So being able to help them is a huge passion of ours. And we really hope that the next trial shows good results and then we can, provide more relief to them.
Thank you so much for the work that you are doing, and also Spark Biomedical. So thank you for being on our podcast today.
Thank you, Julie. It's such a pleasure. And Jason, always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Doc. Man, I know you guys are moved a lot by people like heroes like Navid. And remember, life is short. So take care of yourself and take care of each other. Until next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Positive Recovery MD. Don't forget to visit positiverecoverymd.com to sign up to get your daily positive intervention sent straight to your inbox. Be sure to subscribe to Positive Recovery MD on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcasts to receive an automatic download when a new episode drops. And as always, if you or someone you know needs help, visit positiverecovery.com or call 877-4-SOBRIETY, which is 877-476-2743. We are here to help.